Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time, and the most important updates are coming from Avdiivka direction. The Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish control not just over the residential area between the railways, this territory, but the Russians managed to move further in the northwestern direction and to answer the stronghold by the name of Ocheretyne. We have geolocations, we have videos, we have updates from different mappers. The battle for the stronghold has already started, and this is a very bad and critical situation for the Ukrainians, because if the Ukrainians lose the stronghold, if the Ukrainians lose Ocheretyne, then this situation will allow the Russians to answer and to get the operational space, and from that very moment the Russians will be able to choose the next destination of a further offensive operation. You know that the Western sources are saying that the Russians are going to start the summer greatest Russian offensive operation. We had a lot of, let's say, talks and discussions of that operation. Some sources were saying that the Russians are planning to attack Kharkiv. Other sources were saying that the Russians are going to attack Odessa and so on. But now the military experts are saying that very likely the Russians, during the summer greatest Russian offensive operation, will try to establish control and to attack Pokrovsk itself. The Russians will try to move from Ocheretyne foothold to the north in direction of the village by the name of Yablunovka, and this is already the outskirts of Konstantinovka. So simply saying, the Russians will try to establish complete control over Donetsk and Lugansk regions as a result of Russian summer greatest offensive operation. Now let's return back to Ocheretyne. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State, the Russians managed also to improve their positions along these triangles, so the Russians are getting closer and closer to the town by the name of Novokalinovo, for it's on the western flank. On the eastern flank of the same settlement, the Russians managed to capture additional tree lines and, let's say, the western part of the village. So this is approximately the Russian control area of control on the, let's say, eastern, flank and the eastern outskirts of Novokalinovo ceramic foothold. So as we can see, during the next 24 hours, 48 hours, we can expect additional attacks from the Russian side from the west, and additional attacks from the Russian side from the east, trying to establish complete encirclement of the stronghold and to encircle as many as possible Ukrainians who are currently located in the villages by the name of Ceramic and in the village by the name of Novokalinovo. So as we can see, the situation is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians, and currently the Ukrainians still haven't provided us any, let's say, solutions how to stop or slow down the Russians. Interesting details and updates are coming from Krasnohorivka, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. If you remember, yesterday in the evening we reported that, according to information we have, the Russians have already launched an offensive operation on the industrial zone, but yet we haven't received any geolocations or videos confirming this. But from the other side, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the southern part of the stronghold. Also, the Russians managed to establish control over around 20% of central part of Krasnohorivka. So approximately this is the current control of the Russian forces. Very likely the Russians managed to improve their positions during the previous night, and they will improve their positions during the upcoming day, and then the situation is going to be completely difficult for the Ukrainians, and most likely they will be forced to start withdrawing process within the next few days. On this video we can see the artillery preparations of the armed forces of Russian Federation. The Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces inside of the stronghold. The Russians were suppressing Ukrainian FPV drone positions, let's say some mortar positions, some reinforcements and reserves that the Ukrainians were trying to send to stabilize the situation, but most of the Ukrainian attempts were failed and didn't bring significant or any results for the Ukrainians. So the situation is getting worse and worse, as we can see. Furthermore, don't forget that there are very heavy and difficult situation in Konstantinovka and Novomikhailivka, yet we haven't received any updates during the previous night, but obviously we are going to start receiving during the next few days. Siver's direction also we have a lot of very interesting details. The battle for the landfill and for the village itself is very difficult for the Russians, but despite the difficulties, the Russians managed to improve their positions as well, and they're getting closer and closer to the main defense belt in the let's say the landfill itself, and we have some geolocations and videos confirming this. For example, on this video we can see another attempt to storm this, let's say, the landfill with the infantry. The Russian soldiers were rising on the the hill, and they were under attack of Ukrainian mortar systems. But anyway, this video confirms additional progress. As we discussed in the previous videos, the main goal and the main purpose of the Russians is to, let's say, cut this small piece of pie for small pieces and to establish additional control over every single day, more and more, and getting closer and closer to Bilogorovka itself. So this is the promisable day. Probably going to receive a lot of updates for today, and now we understand the most important. We understand why the United States of America urgently started discussion of another or additional military aid package to Ukraine, because as we understand, during the previous months, years, the United States of America tried to give Ukrainians as much as possible, and they suppose that the military help the United States of America provided in 2023 would be enough to hold Ukraine as long as possible and until at least the end of the president elections. But on the 18th of April, the United States of America realized that the help they provided was not enough, and Ukraine is about to collapse and about to be captured by the Russian forces and the Russian army. So that's why, despite the problems and fights between Democrats and Republicans, the United States of America, the House of Representatives project involves appropriating 61 billion in connection with the conflict in Ukraine, and including 23 billion to replenish US arsenals, etc. So very likely that this, let's say, military aid package will be adopted by the Western countries, and most likely the Ukrainians are going to start receiving the additional help in the very near future. So which confirms that all the games and all these scenes and show that we saw in the United States Senate between Republicans and Democrats was just a show and nothing more. The United States of America are planning to continue the special military operation, continue to invest money in Ukraine, continue sending additional weapon. The things that we saw was just a game, was just a, let's say, presidential elections game with the purpose, let's say, to reduce as many as possible noise and, let's say, from Ukraine, and reduce the connections between the United States of America and Ukraine during the president elections period. But now the gloves are off, and obviously this is another wave, another step of escalation between the United States of America, Russia in the territory of Ukraine. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.